Right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bizz Talk. I'm your host, Jason Schuster from Bizz Tech, and I'm here today with my friend Keith Farr. How you doing, Keith?
So good to see you. Thank you for getting me on board and also allowing me to just quickly share this link with other people. It's amazing. Give me a sec. So nice to be here. Yeah, I've
Absolutely.
got full attention now. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, really excited in South Africa at the moment. And I know the time difference always is a challenge, but it's great to connect with people that are doing stuff innovatively and everything. So very excited about this. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I'm excited too, Keith. And Keith's here from Cross Pond. He's a consultant, but I know Keith more as a production expert. And we've done so. We did an event together a little while ago, and he and his team were just absolutely fantastic. So really excited to have you here today. And our topic is how to live stream an event, which I think is kind of a broad topic, but I can't think of a better guest to really dive into it. So, Keith, can you get us started? Tell the audience a little bit about your background, a little bit about kind of your career up to this point.
So it's an interesting word you use, career, because a lot of people would say jack of all trades, master of none. I'm more a kind of a jack of all trades and very good at a lot. That's the way I'm seeing it. I kind of started off in education, but that was also like a two-stream, excuse the pun, but a two-stream delving also into eventing and DJing. And subsequently, over the last few years, I've kind of delved into education quite strongly with a background of special needs, which then also in tandem was working with animation and film and how to support educational objectives. And from that kind of dive in point, I then got involved in more corporate work, did some work for London Underground overseas, video analysis, traffic flow analysis, even some sort of eventing, because my background is also very strongly in eventing. So in the 90s, I used to organize agricultural shows. You know, Jack Russell's run across the field at 9:05, tractor racing at 10:05, fireworks at 10. Bam, there's your show. So that kind of logistic organization has always been what I've always done. And then combining that, kind of got into the virtual space. So then since 2004, 2005, I got into the streaming of small events, sports events, and kind of built up a understanding of how to do broadcast more effectively in the educational sphere. Then I came back to South Africa in 2012 and started working on bigger shows, sort of the Kevin Harts of the world, doing their live events. So I was very much involved in AV and multicam mixing. So that's where the production kind of experience launched me into that environment. Again, it's been a real blend and a real journey. So I kind of see it as a polymath approach to pulling the real world into the virtual world and then communicating effectively using the right tools. Because every day a new tool is invented. So when we talk about streaming, it's a very simple thing to do in many people's eyes, but then always you've got to go, well, what's your real objective? And what are you actually streaming, or are you doing like we're doing now, where we're talking to each other and then we're streaming the output? So
Right.
again, what's the overall objective? Was that my 2 minutes, or did I go a little bit longer?
Oh, you're fine.
I was
Yeah,
3 minutes. Yeah.
no worries of going over a little bit. No, it's true.
Okay.
It's very interesting to hear about that, and yeah, you have a lot of experience, kind of in a lot of different areas. So I understand the jack of all trades comment, but from what I've seen you do, you're actually very good at the things that you do in all those different areas. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing right now. Tell us me about Cross Pond, or maybe some other exciting things that you're doing right now.
So at the moment, I'm kind of embedded with an advertising agency. So my speciality there was to work in broadcast and online broadcast to elevate their clients. But I've actually ended up doing more editing and animation work, animation at a lesser degree. And it's kind of one of my passions. But I'm realizing that from a broadcast perspective, I'm a TV guy. I like to do live stuff. And although I never worked in old school TV, I think my radio experience and then coming into this environment where what we're doing now, actually at this level, audio is everything. So you pay the respect to the audio. So the kind of events we're doing at the moment involve a blended solution where we're creating content for live polo transmission. So we'll have 3 camera operators in the UK, and I'm working in partnership with 3 other people. So my cross-pond title is just me alone, but I actually get sucked into other projects, and I become anonymous. And it's actually quite a paradigm shift that in terms of how you manage your entity, because even if your name isn't up front, eventually people find out what you do. Whereas maybe 20 years ago, it was all about putting your name up front, but you kind of then realize with a bit of maturity, you don't have to always have your name in front. So I'm always quite sensitive to that kind of approach, to be cognizant of the fact that some people's brand is more important than your brand. So you always consider yourself to be a supporter of an objective. So producer in that regard. So just to turn that key completely, when we're looking at what we're doing at the moment, we're taking the technology that enables us to get sub-second delayed content from any camera in the world, and in this case, polo, sports, integrated with live data capture that speaks to graphics to then be combined and broadcast at an international level that ESPN will take to be able to then cover an event like a polo game in the UK. Where previously that price tag might have been in the region of about £10,000 to £15,000 for a day's production, or even £20,000.
Right.
We can do that at a quarter of the price and the same production level with only 2 hours setup time. Because we're using bonded cellular technology, we're using the cloud, we're using editors who are in Argentina, and we're using coders who watch the game and then analyze the game, and they enter along Google Sheets, which updates our graphics in real time. We're then using over a 24-hour kind of time span. In one time span, we're using all these skills to produce content. And the content then is on a VOD platform. So at one stage last year, the Queen, when Prince Philip was still alive, they had a login detail to watch the content we were producing. So I've worked for Mandela and I've worked for the Queen. I don't know what that means really, but that's what I can say.
That's actually really amazing. And Mandela and the Queen, those are some big names. I love it. I
did Mandela's birthday in 94. It was 93. It's one of the most life-changing experiences ever. He walked into the room. I mean, everyone has a Mandela story in theory. Like if you're in South Africa and you kind of got it, So he walked into the room and he stood next to the microphone I was mixing. I said to him, Mr. President, do you sound okay? And he said, well, of course. Obviously in his Mandela voice. That was my Sean Connery voice, but you get the idea.
Right. I love it. That's so cool. And yeah, you've mentioned a couple of other big
So
names.
just in a nutshell, Sorry, I was just going to say, so in a nutshell, I'm focusing on action sports at the moment, and also marathons and that kind of stuff. So we sit in that field where the technology is constantly being challenged and evolving. Mobile phones have been integrated into live mixers. Why? Because you can aggregate, you can bond the mobile phone signal plus the Wi-Fi signal. And then we've got a partner with an international company called LiveView, who provide the bonded technology to the Olympics and to FIFA. And when you've got a partner like that, suddenly now you've got hitting power and you can be creative. So that's really where we're sitting on this. We're looking at how we can disrupt all the time and constantly innovate.
I love all of that. That's amazing. And it's I would say that
I'm sorry, Jason,
your
you there.
approach. Sorry? Go ahead, Keith. What was that? We might have a slight delay. So I apologize for that.
No, you're good. I've got you again. I've got
you got me again. Okay, perfect. It's good. Well, let's actually dive from there into the topic, because you kind of set it up. You talked a little bit about what you're doing right now, talking a little bit about technologies and approach. So let's dive into this topic, which is how to live stream an event. And my question is, what is step one, Keith? If I want to put on an event and I want to live stream it, I want it to be a great experience. Where do we start?
The first thing it's almost like baking a cake or taking a car apart, is understanding what's your objective. Because without understanding why you're streaming, then you actually can't plan what you're streaming. Because a lot of people will stream something and think, okay, I'm just going to put a camera in front of the presenter. Now, if the presenter's doing a PowerPoint and that PowerPoint has dark writing on a white background, and the presenter themselves may have bright clothing but dark skin, and they're standing in front of a logo that's bright yellow, unless you've lit that environment properly, unless you've mixed the PowerPoint properly as a picture-in-picture, and unless you've done audio properly to integrate any content that's going to come out of the PowerPoint, those technical issues are going to totally impede your camera just pointed at the screen. Because on an automatic exposure, it's just going to be a white mess of bright light from the presentation, which is white, and you're not going to see the presenter's face. So my question is, what's the objective always? And the other question you always got to ask yourself is, are you going to need synchronized or asynchronized feedback from people who are watching? In other words, what we're doing at the moment is synchronized interaction. Potentially what people are doing when they're watching us on YouTube is asynchronized, because they're watching it live or later. Their feedback loop into the equation is based on what they're doing. So the simple question is first, what is the objective? Because sometimes you don't need to live stream. You might be better off pre-recording and doing something in post-production. So that's the first question.
Interesting. Now, let's say that we know all the answers to those questions, and okay, let's say the objective is I want to bring interesting people together, and I'm hoping to maybe get some clients out of the event on the back end. So I want a good experience. I want to bring interesting people together, and I want to use it as a tool to generate business. So where would you take me from there, Keith?
So your other word you've used there, which is quite crucial, is the word tool. Streaming is a tool that forms part of a whole bunch of stuff in your toolbox. Right. So if you're going to stream something, you've had to promote it. You've had to actually put it in the context of what you're trying to do. And also, you need to acknowledge that if you're going to stream something and you're going to have commercial music in it, then you can't put it on YouTube or even on Facebook. Or if you do, you've got to acknowledge that there's going to be some truncation going on. And if you've got sponsors involved who are going to get maximum reward for what you're doing, you've also got to promote it with enough time. So again, you've got to almost have a mini business plan. And in our realm, I think that's clearly the objective always, is how can you get maximum return for what you do? How can you generate leads? And how can you get customers to go, wow, what that person is saying, I want to actually speak to them more. So ultimately what we're doing here, is we're dissecting something very simple, but we're saying there's lots going on in the background. And that plan has got to be quite tightly looked at. Because like a reservoir of content, whether you stream something, if it's going to YouTube, are you doing live highlights that are cut to Twitter as little feeds? So from COP26, if Biden talks about what's happening in America and their approach to what's going on, that little soundbite needs to be immediately available to Al Jazeera. So are you looking at how you manage your content quickly and effectively so that you can get the maximum purchase out of the live stream? And then what is your competition and what is your plan if you're getting also kickback from traditional broadcasters? Are you integrating with them, or are you in competition with them, or are you just going straight to them and saying, here's my feed of Polo, you can take it or don't take it, it's up to you, but we're still going on a VOD platform and we're monetizing that. So again, that the business plan needs to be thought properly all the way through it. And also different products have different objectives. So sports obviously has a particular objective. What we're doing at the moment can't be monetized because actually it's the kind of thing where people go, oh, if I've got some time, I'll catch it.
Right.
Our presentation, audio is everything. So we needed to be, we met beforehand, we had that conversation. So the stream, again, is a tool. But unless it's put in the context of everything, I think the educational conversation is one which is a very difficult one to have, because a lot of people think that educational presentations about what we're doing now and flicking between a PowerPoint. But then do you host that in a Moodle? How do you then actualize how you interact with 40 students who might be 12 to 13 years old, who are more interested in trying to disrupt the equation as opposed to be involved in it?
Wow.
So
That's
streaming sometimes
gosh, a
isn't the
lot of
right
factors.
solution for certain objectives.
Yeah. No, sorry. Keep going, Keith.
Maybe a
I was just
delayed
commenting
response in
that
terms of
I was just saying that that's
recording the
just a lot of
yeah,
there's a lot of considerations. There's a lot of factors. So yeah, sorry. Keep going, Keith.
exactly. So what I was going to say was, like, in an educational context, sometimes the argument should be had that the best way of dealing with presentations to students is perhaps pre-recorded content, which is live streamed, but the teacher then can manage the students during the process with interactions. Or that the live stream is in fact not the whole lesson. It's a plenary, an intro, reflective conversations, and then back into the equation.
Right.
But these are all seen as streaming. And that's the other problem I have with that blanket kind of approach. Because streaming is even laid down as being what happens when CNN put their stuff out in another portal. And all they're doing is uploading clips that have been post-edited, potentially. So
Right.
again, the stream label also needs to be considered carefully in its context.
Now, quick question about pre-recorded content. Have you found in your experience that audiences find pre-recorded content being live streamed as disingenuous? Are they looking for a genuine live experience, or have you found that that's not really an issue when it comes to streamed content in today's environment?
So it's a really good question, and it does speak to different objectives linked with different types of audience. So if I'm looking at a business audience where I'm needing to share mission critical information, then for me to pre-record that can be blended with a live element as well. And a lot of the people I've worked with have done that very successfully because they've created something that at a production level is very clean. And then you embed that within the context of a live presentation, you can actually get the momentum of the live interaction to then carry the piece. The problem, I think, is people overestimate attention spans. Like even us doing now a half an hour speech is probably pushing the limits a bit as to what people actually want to watch. Maybe,
Sure.
The argument could be had if we had, although our interaction is organic. So if we had some pre-recorded content in this context, it probably wouldn't have flown at all because people would have lost interest if we had switched to something that's 2 or 3 minutes long. I've said, okay, now I'm going to show you some of the polo. And like, there's actually no point in doing that because people can just go and have a look at it. What they really want to catch in this environment is us talking to each other. So pre-recorded used correctly is in a very effective way of producing a full production. Again, what's the objective? I'll go back to that.
Absolutely. Okay, perfect. Now, kind of moving on. We've come up with answers to all of those questions. We've kind of looked at all those angles. What would be the next thing that I should consider moving forward with the event?
So I would say, if you look at a production that SpaceX does, they managed to blend data with excellent interviews, with amazing shots, with content that you're willing to watch for 3 or 4 hours if you're into space, of course. So also the other key thing they get right is niche. But just their very simple way that they tell a narrative. I think every stream or everything you do needs to speak to some of these basic principles. Not necessarily act 1, act 2, act 3 with drama in a Shakespearean way, but just what is your journey that you're taking everyone? Just like now, we're talking about the steps in streaming. And everyone goes, oh, I know how to stream. Fair enough. But my question would be again, what is your narrative? So even if you're doing a mountain bike race, you're covering the beginning, you're setting up the tension. And I think a very good example of this, and obviously in a very high level, and obviously not live streamed, but Netflix's production of F1, Drive to Survive, has very successfully set up the tension where you're interested in positions 13 and 14. That wasn't even on the radar for anyone who ever watched that beforehand. And simply what they've done is they've created the drama and the narrative. So in the same way, when people stream a live event, if I can get the drama of basketball team A and basketball team B, or the mountain bike tension between the teams, that's converted visually, plus the data that goes with it to show their speeds, to show their training, and then also the commentary needs to speak to that journey. Obviously for exhibitions, it's a different challenge. But again, I think there needs to be storytelling and there needs to be a narrative to it because everyone is swamped. The only way you're going to differentiate yourself and stick your head above the parapet is by paying attention to script, narrative, giving production its due respect, and don't just expect to stand up in front of a screen and suddenly talk like I am.
That's right. Sorry about that, Keith. No, it's good. Now, okay, that's really interesting. And it makes so much sense. But how many content creators and event organizers are actually thinking along these lines? I mean, I have to imagine maybe some people have that figured out, but my gut tells me that most people aren't even thinking like that.
But that's okay as well. For them, their objective is they just want to show their cat pushing another cat. Go for it. That's a live
Right.
stream. Is the cat lit well? Have you taken care of the cat's needs? And have you got something funny to say when the cat finishes? Are you streaming it for 5 hours? And has your viewership gone from 1,500 to 3? Look at The Matrix. Change your cat show. Again, what's the objective?
What's the objective? Keep coming back to that question. What's the objective? Okay.
But you have gone niche. Let's be honest. Cat wrestling is not for everybody.
It's not. It's not. But for that audience, it's that's the content. That's what it is. That's what they want. And I would imagine that there's probably a pretty strong following for that niche. So okay, perfect. So then,
well, I think if I can just interrupt you on one thing. That if you take something like Squid Games, it's shone the light on Korean production and how different it is to what European and Western production is. And if you consider the niche focus that NFL have got now, where for $250 a year, you can just watch NFL content. That speaks to niche and well catered for. So if you create quality content, and be it streamed or post-production, whatever, eventually you're going to get a following. And obviously there's certain financial constraints that in budget. And I'll talk just now if we get into the technicalities of assuring that you produce something that's reliable. But ultimately, obviously we work at a level where we're going business. Some of the people who in this environment are going, I just want to stream something, and that's what they want to do. That's cool. But you can elevate the level of what you're doing stuff by just following some simple things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, it's gosh, everything that you're saying is just resonating with me really, really well. It's things that make sense, but I have to imagine a lot of people don't think about it. So I think that it paints a picture that it's important for people who want to do a good job to speak to someone like you to really understand the bigger picture when it comes to streaming, not just, like you said, not just, oh, I'm just going to stream something onto the internet. Hopefully someone watches it. So I appreciate that. If we can for a second, you keep coming back to this idea of what's the objective? At BizTech, we specialize in business events. That's what we do. We do virtual business events. So let's just go with that real quick. So with a business event, is there anything different that you would change, or are there any things to consider that are different from like, for instance, what you're doing with polo, or you use the example of mountain biking? I mean, what are the really big differences there?
To be very blunt and early of it, there's one thing across the board, doesn't matter what event or what thing you're trying to do. The first thing about it is get the audio right. Audio is the baseline. Second of all is, in terms of business, you want sponsors' logos to look amazing. You want it to be well structured, and it needs to be very, very slick. And if you're going to show sponsors' logos, they need to be highest quality as possible. Also, as we are now, you can see our faces properly. So lighting is imperative, and making sure things run on time, because you've got business people, they don't want to have any technical problems. So actually, even before this happens, you want to have run tests with all the people who are involved that they've got the right options to access effectively. So have they got up and down speed that's reliable? And if they haven't,
Right.
what's your plan B? What's your plan C? So my favorite word, redundancy. Expect something to go wrong. So if you're streaming 1080i at 6 megs, but then someone is sitting in Nairobi and they've only got 3 megabits per second, how are you supporting them to access? So there's also an issue of diversity here and inclusion. You can't take the baseline of Los Angeles being what everyone can access. The baseline is actually Kazakhstan, which that's maybe a bad example, they're pretty good. It's probably Botswana at 2 megabits per second, up and down. And how do they become integrated? So your audio is your first key. And in fact, what I would suggest is that sometimes, especially for business, you want to offer an option that if the stream falls over, there's also an audio stream. So you actually have 4 streams running in conjunction: high level, low level, mid level, and audio independently. Because the audio will carry everything. Because they can always be sent the PowerPoint to go through as well. So always have, in terms of business, you've got to expect things to go wrong. And you've got to have plan A, B, C, D, and they all need to be running in conjunction.
Beautiful.
That's
Beautiful.
the big thing for me.
I didn't even think about having so many different options available for contingency. That's brilliant. Now we've only got a few minutes left, and the last question that I wanted to, and by the way, this was not enough time to really cover this, so I think that it does make sense for us to do another show here in the near future, and we can dive a little bit deeper into this topic, or if there's some other aspects of just live event streaming production that we want to dive into, we can. But the last question that I wanted to ask that I'm sure our audience is curious about is what are some of the essential tools that need to be part of the toolbox if I'm going to start streaming an event or something similar to that?
So my blanket answer would be a good tech team. If you're doing it yourself, though, good audio, so lapel or similar, a boom mic if you've got a few people, good lighting, 3-point lighting. At the moment, I've just got 1-point lighting, as you can see, just a front light, but actually I need lighting on the back so I don't cast any shadows, so nothing gets distracted. Certainly also, if you're relying on PowerPoints, you want to have some sort of mixing facility so that you can do a multicam mix, that you can integrate PowerPoints, picture in picture, that you can, in essence, also send your signal to some bonded technology. Especially in South Africa, we have things such as power outages and sometimes just cables getting ripped up. So the point is, you don't want to be putting the proverbial eggs in all the basket. You want to have a bonded solution where it's using 2 or 3 SIM cards, where it then also bonds with an Ethernet, so your landline, plus also a wireless solution. So instead of relying on one conjugate, you're relying on 5 conjugates. And that immediately means you can guarantee upload. And that to me is the closed circle. If you're taking care of those things, you're going to have a successful stream. And then if you've rehearsed and you've practiced and you give it the respect that it's due, because a stream is not a stream unless it's a production. If it's not a production, then it's 2 cats having a fight.
I like that. 2 cats having a fight. That's funny. I like that.
To you, Jason.
No, this is perfect. Thank you so much, Keith. I appreciate it. We're out of time. But this was fantastic. Keith, thank you so much for being here. Sorry, I think we do have a delay, by the way. So I apologize for that if it looks like I'm not talking on your end, Keith. So anyways, thank you so much for being here, Keith. This was fantastic. Like I said, we need to do another show here.
Maybe you didn't get. I'm not going to repeat any of that, but let's see if we pick it up again. Hold on. I'm just going to type you quick. Okay, it's going to be a problem on my side.
think I might have lost Keith, but hopefully we'll get him back here in just a second. But to our audience, I hope you guys really enjoyed Keith's presentation. It was fantastic. Keith is truly an expert in this area. Like he was saying, his experience goes back all the way to the early 90s in live events and production. I've worked with him on an event before, and he was fantastic. So I highly recommend him as a consultant and the teams that he works with. So if you're doing a live event, or even if you're doing a virtual event, I highly recommend reaching out to Keith. And for Keith, thank you so much for being here. Looking forward to having you again here on the show again for to dive a little bit deeper or into another aspect of this topic. And to our audience, thank you so much. See you next time. Take care.